final Monday of April already. How did we get here on the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Forrest? Welcome, everybody, to Monday night on Warchant TV. Hit the thumbs up as you arrive. I'm next to, as always, managing editor of Warchant.com. His name is Irish Raffel. My name is Tom Lang. We'll talk more about State Farm agent Russ Forrest and his sponsorship in just a little bit. But here we go. It's almost May. Unbelievable to think. I feel like, Ira, just moments ago, we were at spring break in the middle of March. But these last 6 weeks kind of flew by.
Yeah, and you think about it, May really is it's the start of the summer in terms of football goes, college football, because in the next couple of weeks, a lot of the kids who signed with Florida State and other schools back in December but couldn't enroll early or couldn't transfer in then will be coming on board in the next week or two. So they're going to have their full team gathered for the first time for the 2025 season within the next couple of weeks. Then they'll go into their summer workouts. They'll have their player run practices, but then also the coach run practices. They'll be installing stuff, and man, before you know it, we're going to be in preseason camp. And yeah, May feels a whole lot closer than April did.
It's a huge difference, and it's only a matter of days. But yeah, psychologically, you start to feel the juices a little bit. Also, I think, Ira, this is just personally speaking, I want to get your take on this. Now that the portal window is closed, right, you can't enter your name in anymore. There were some lingering pieces of paperwork that processed through today. Tennessee had a high-profile one in the secondary. It's like, all right, all these whispers about would Florida State lose a high-profile player, like that's done. Whoever's in the portal is in the portal. There was some sweating, I think, behind the scenes. I don't want to call it a 10 out of 10 panic level, but I think everybody was waiting for this thing to close on Friday evening.
Yeah, they definitely were. And you talk to people, and again, this isn't the coaching staff necessarily. Maybe it's people around the program and different departments. And, people would say stuff like, yeah, man, there's some of these kids are going to hold them hostage, and it's just the reality. They know the portal window is coming, and if they like their NIL deal or they like their revenue sharing deal, whatever it's going to be in the fall, but maybe they'd like it to be a little bit higher. And so now you have a little bit of chicken, and some of those guys maybe you do renegotiate. Cause like you said, if it's a high enough profile player and a player they feel like they can't replace, maybe they do come up a little bit, or the person had a great spring, or they say, listen, man, we love you, but we loved you at that price. We're not changing our terms. And so guys have to make decisions. So at the end of the day, like I agree with you. I think, second year in a row, there was a lot of buzz, not just about Florida State, but nationally about all the players that are going to go in the portal. And there were a lot nationally, but Florida State, of the 10 guys who went in the portal in this window, there's one or two maybe you'd like to keep, but for the most part, you're going to be able to replace them really easily.
Yeah, we played that game last week. I'll change the type of naming of the game. No haymakers were delivered. To Florida State lost in the portal. There were no haymakers, and there were whispers that might have happened, but not anymore. So this is the roster that Florida State has. They can only add to it in terms of other kids that are in the portal. We've got an article available right now on warchant.com, 5 targets that Florida State is looking at, and it's from a variety of different positions. If you're a Warchant subscriber, you can get those, but secondary, defensive line, and more. Don't want to give away all of them.
Yeah, and the biggest news in the biggest news on that front, just in the last hour or so, it's breaking that one of a safety from Tennessee, who we thought was going to go in the portal, it was reported he was going into the portal a few days ago, but as of earlier this morning, he still had not appeared in the portal, even though he submitted the paperwork late Friday. It processed through early this afternoon, and it's Jacoby. I can't remember his last name. Jacoby Thomas, and he's announced that he's going to visit 2 schools and 2 schools only, Florida State and Miami. So it's one of those where you either get him or you're going to play against him. And I think safety was a position we thought Florida State probably need to get some help. They've got a couple other guys that they're looking at that position. So if they don't get him, it's not all or nothing. But he definitely seems to be pretty high on their list.
Well, and this is somebody that Florida State has a personal connection to. Rick Stockstill is Florida State's offensive lead. Is it analyst? Lead scout on offense. And obviously he coached him when he was the head coach at Middle Tennessee. So there already is a connection there that could help get Jacoby Thomas on campus for Florida State. We'll see if they close the deal there. There are going to be some visits as the week goes on, I think all the way through this weekend in terms of targets that Florida State has in the portal. Although you put an asterisk next to that, Ira, because this is very different from high school recruiting, where official visits are going to be held, and usually the kids go on all their visits. Like this is, it's like a tour. But every university tries to get the tour to stop at one destination, their own. So the first visit for Jacoby Thomas is going to be important. But for all of the kids that Florida State is in on, if Tallahassee's not their first stop, then you hope they get on a plane or get in the car and keep going to hear what other schools have to say.
Yeah, it's almost the exact opposite of high school recruiting. In high school recruiting, a lot of times you want that last visit. You want the last thoughts that are in his mind, and the families feeling good about it. And that's what's freshest on their mind as they make a decision. In high school recruiting and in transfer portal recruiting, you do want to be first. You want to be first. You want to get the deal done. Because a lot of times, listen, it's a lot more transactional at this point. The player's been through the recruiting process. Most of them don't want to take the photo shoot anymore. They don't need to see, all the academic programs. Listen, I'm coming to your school in most cases. Now, some, if a player's got 3 or 4 years left, that might be a little bit more prolonged of a process. But for the guys that only have 1 more year, or maybe even 2 more years, a lot of times it's much quicker, and you just want to get them first. And that's a lot of negotiations will be happening before anybody steps foot on campus, because you have to let them know how serious you are about wanting them.
And that's what happened with Jeremiah Wilson in terms of the intel. It sounded like much of the conversation in that regard happened before he arrived on campus. So that way it was a little bit smoother of a moment for Florida State where they could close the deal. And that's somebody who Florida State has already added in Jeremiah Wilson, a defensive back, a corner specifically from Houston. Excellent grades from the PFF folks, if that's your cup of tea. One of the top ranked defensive backs in the portal. Anywhere you look, he's one of the top-ranked defensive backs in the portal. The thing, Ira, that I liked hearing about with Jeremiah Wilson is that amongst his teammates, another player from Houston who entered the portal, he was known as a film junkie and somebody who could explain to his teammates how to watch film. Well, that's important on 2 fronts. He already has experience in Tony White's defense. He's also really good at breaking down film. That sounds like the right kind of get for Florida State, where it's a plug-and-play asset, not only as a player, but as somebody who can help bring the other guys along, the younger players in the secondary. Sounds like it's a nice fit for Florida State.
Yeah, and a lot of personality. If you watch the video that we got up on the site, and I think Michael posted that in his piece, in his analysis piece on the signing, was that he was really just blown away by, and I know Michael's going to be on the show later tonight, so he could talk about that, but he was blown away by his personality and his kind of charisma, and it comes through on the video. And so, man, this is, again, for a team that desperately needed that. And this was a team that desperately needed that. So anytime you hear about it, whether it's Tommy Castellanos, whether it's Deuce Robinson, whether it's, any really those new offensive linemen, any Pettibon and those guys, anytime you hear that somebody's got a kind of a strong personality, some leadership skills, it's very welcome on this football team. And he seems to have it.
Well, and that's what last time Florida State went through the process of, disappointing seasons and they climbed back up. They found, 3, 4, 5 players that fit that mold that can help you flip a culture. And that's one thing, Ira, that in real time, I didn't realize that they would need that much help year over year. But then once you see this thing spiral during the football season, you know that there's a lot of work to be done. This looks like he's a good fit. Deuce Robinson, I know, has been a very good fit in the wide receiver room. Tommy Castellanos was awfully active in the portal when it comes to recruiting potential teammates. And you're right, on the offensive line, it sounds like Florida State has a few anchors there. So when Mike Norvell said he was looking for elite effort out of players, I don't think it was just about hustling down the backside of a play if it wasn't your own responsibility. I think he was also looking for character profiles so they can flip this thing in the mentality of his group a little bit more fundamentally.
Yeah, and some of the things they talked about, with this group of transfers that you didn't hear as much with the last group of transfers was how many of these guys were captains of their teams. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were just pointing out that, historically, a lot of teams, when you recruit, it does mean something if a player was on a championship team, if the player won individual championships, if the player was a high achiever in multiple sports. Those are things that maybe you can't quantify them, and they don't go on the, okay, he's 6'5", he's 250 pounds, he runs a 4.5, whatever. They're not as quantifiable, but those are things that usually lead to being winning football players. And when you bring in guys who are just, impressive physically, but maybe were never high achievers, maybe have never been the star of their team, maybe have never led a team to a championship, then, a lot of times when things aren't going well, they're not the people who are going to step up. And I think we always think of like leaders, and then we think of people who are like malcontents. We don't think about the vast majority of players on the team are going to be in the middle. They're not bad kids, but maybe they're not leaders. And what happens with a team or a program is the kids who can be malcontents are battling on one side, and the positive leaders are on the other side. And it's like, who's going to win that tug of war? And a lot of times, you just need more of those guys on that side, because there's going to be bad times. I mean, something's going to happen. Something's going to go wrong. And it's okay, are they going to line up with that guy? Because if you have 100-something players, you're going to have somebody who's a negative influence at times, and you have people in the positive. You just need more of the people pulling in that direction. I don't think that was a huge priority for them last year. I think they thought, oh, we've got a program now. Those guys will assimilate. We don't need to worry about it. I think now they realize, no, you do have to worry about it. And I think they're putting a premium on it.
Got a fun question in from Hayden. We appreciate the contribution to the program, Hayden. He says, would you rather, pipeline edition, Japan to U.S. sumo wrestlers for offensive linemen or Icelandic rugby players for linebacker? This is a very headliners question, hour number 2, Seminole headlines question, but I love it, Hayden. Thank you for bringing it to the Smash on a Monday night. Oh, man. I think I would go ahead, Ira. Go ahead.
Well, I think I'm going to go with the rugby players. Just because, you want the toughness. You got to have the toughness. And I feel like there's got to be some agility and some quickness and some athletic ability. I'm not sure about the sumo wrestlers, especially, if you get out in the perimeter, you want to run some zone stuff. I get the idea. And down at the goal line, maybe you want those sumo guys, but I'm going to go with the rugby guys. How about you?
Yeah, if you could promise me that these are sumo wrestlers who, to your point, can get out on a screen and get downfield 20 and 30 yards, they're athletic enough to pull that off, then I'll take the sumo wrestlers. But if it's sight unseen, give me the rugby players for linebackers. That would be something to see. I appreciate that, Hayden. That's a very good question. We see a lot of folks making their way into the chat. Many of you are Warchant Premier members. You have the green designation in the chat, as well as the use of emojis, fun extra little emojis. Y'all, if you're a member, last week had the extra Seminole headlines made available to you. So if you want to join, look, everything at Warchant TV in terms of our coverage, our news, all that stuff is going to be free. There are extras. If you want to be a Warchant Premier member, just click below. I think it's below my camera on the screen. It says join the channel. We thank everybody who has already done that. Wes in the Villages asks, yo, Tom and Ira, what are your thoughts about the football team adding the practices scrimmages they missed in the fall? And what would it take to have that be a possibility? Keep up the great work. I think if you don't use them, you lose them. That's how I would understand it. I don't think there's a make good policy there. Am I wrong, Ira?
Yeah, I think the question is, if you apply, if you appeal to the NCAA and say, hey, we'd like to start 2 days earlier, we had a shooting on campus, feels like in this era, there used to be a time when the NCAA said no to everything. Now, I feel like you might have a chance to get it. I just don't know if there's a diminishing return at that point. By 2 weeks into preseason camp, most players are pretty much tired of practice. And so now that third week is usually really difficult because they're not installing stuff game plan yet for the season opener. They're still kind of doing just day-to-day practices. They've been doing it for 2 or 3 weeks. They're tired of it. I don't know that adding 2 more days at the front end is going to help you a whole lot. It might be, again, diminishing returns. On the other side of it, yeah, man, I don't think anybody at FSU and the football staff is happy that they lost those 2 days. I don't want to undersell that it's a negative. They were going to have a scrimmage. They wanted to have that scrimmage. They did plan out 15 practices with a plan of what they wanted to accomplish, but campus got closed down because of a tragedy. And then the next week started recruiting and portal and all that. It is what it is. It's just one of those things that you just, you chalk it up to that stinks, but I don't know that it fixes any. I don't think it makes you whole to practice 2 more times in late July. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, maybe you could stick those practices like in June when Cromagh gets on campus, just specifically for him. I think it would be a wonderful thing specifically for that player. But yeah, maybe you could add acclimation days so that way you get into full pads earlier. But we appreciate the question, Wes. I thought that was going to be a hard no from Ira, but you never know. We'll see if they make that potential appeal. Tonight's program, as always, is brought to you by State Farm agent Russ Forrest. No cultural problems whatsoever with State Farm agent Russ Forrest. He has 2 shops on the East Coast in terms of brick and mortar operations in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park. Tonight I'll give you the Orange Park phone number if you're listening on the podcast afterwards, 904-276-9535. That's 904-276-9535. But Russ serves 3 amazing states, Ira, in the southeastern footprint of Warchant TV and our audience here on Warchant. What states are those, and how can he help Noles fans out there?
Florida, Georgia, Alabama, we're calling you. Listen, everybody's got insurance needs, whether it's your auto, your home, all different insurance needs that State Farm can help you with. And Russ is the agent you want to deal with. He is based over there in Jacksonville, as you said. He's a huge Nole, loves helping other Noles. And listen, every year, I just saw a story about this, or a column about this, about how often so many people just, you just renew your insurance. You just renew it. It comes, and the premium, now they'll just charge you the premium without even asking, hey, do you want to renew? They're just going to hit you the premium again. It doesn't hurt to go ask and just see what their rates are, see what their coverages are. Sometimes different people can offer different coverages. And, Russ does a great job, and he would be very happy if you would give him a chance to earn your business and mention that you heard about him on the Smash and Warchant. He loves the Noles. He wants to help you guys. So give him a shout.
And head over to his website. Again, that's his name, russvorhis.com, russvorhis.com. Director Ben, keep an ear open just in case. Ira, for the first time since doing shows at this abode here, giant lightning strikes at Cascades Park. So hopefully we don't have any power issues here. I don't know if you're catching that your way.
I heard a little thunder, which shocked me because I was not expecting that.
Yeah, it's a little pop-up storm. Hopefully it's a good omen for my hockey team that's currently playing in Game 4 of the first round of the Eastern playoffs right now.
I'm a Panther for life, 305,
We're keeping it very civil. Yeah, I know. You are as diehard as it gets when it comes to Florida Panthers enthusiasm. No score updates in the chat, please. I'm sure you all will violate that, but I'm trying to keep it locked here. So before we get to Ira's grievance, and he has a grievance he wants to share with everybody, and I see questions about it in the chat already. So hint, hint, some of you have nailed it. In terms of Battleship, you have a hit. I do want to talk about the portal just a little bit more, Ira. Now we could take a holistic view of what Florida State has done. A couple more pieces, obviously, still to come. But reflecting back on the winter window all the way to now, given the 2-10 situation, I'm not saying Florida State gets an A+ grade with the portal, but I'm not saying they get an F either. They've done a pretty decent job here trying to right the ship after a disastrous season when, you have to incentivize people to come to Florida State.
Yeah, I think the only question we have is how much did they have to incentivize people? Because listen, they are coming off a 2-10, and I think we talked about it at the time. The big questions we had back in November, December was, how are you going to get people who want to come here? Whether that's high school recruits, because they were dropping like flies, the guys that they had committed going into 2024. And then how are you going to replace them? And then how are you going to get portal players to want to come here? And obviously, I'm sure the battle's end, and it was a huge part of it. And then there's going to be revenue sharing this fall. And so maybe they've figured out ways to incentivize guys to get them to buy in. They had a few things break their way. As you said, Deuce Robinson, the fact that I think Deuce Robinson is a mature player. He's been through the process. His father, D-Rob, was a great Nole, and he grew up around the program. So you maybe got a little bit of a discount there. Tommy Castellanos, you had the private relationship with both Norvell and Malzahn, and he had the enticement of an offense that's going to be built around him. So you probably didn't have to pay him top dollar. Randy Pittman, the tight end, played for Gus at UCF. Some of these linemen played for him. So I think you had they pulled on some strings to help them and probably not have to expend all their resources. But I'm sure that was a big part of it as well. And I think at the end of the day, if you go player by player, I think this team's much improved. And it goes back to what I have said for a while now, that anytime we talk about how bad the offense was last year, and it was dreadful. It was hopefully we never see anything like that again. This is nobody on that offense. Only a couple of guys from that offense will even be on this team this year. They have changed out everybody. They've changed out the assistant coaches, changed out the coordinators. And so I think it is going to be a fresh start, a new looking team. And yeah, if you look back at some of the guys they lost in the portal back in December, you lose Destin Hill. That's unfortunate. You've invested so much time and effort into him. You're definitely hoping he would stay around. And there's a couple other players, but for the most part, yeah, I think all they've done is really make this team better than what it was a year ago. Now, how much better, whether it's 8 wins, 7 wins, 10 wins, we'll have to see. But I think I agree with you. I think it's just I think it's a much improved roster.
Yeah, it's this is what they were looking for stabilizing. Again, doesn't mean it's A plus. Doesn't mean we're wearing rose-colored glasses here. We're talking about a 7 to 9 win. That's the target you're trying to land this plane on right now, pending what else they do in the portal. So we'll get to your questions here in a little bit. We also are taking questions from Michael Langston, more portal stuff. In about 15, 20 minutes or so, Michael Langston will be by here on Warchant TV on the Monday Smash to answer portal questions and logistics for the week to come. So if you have anything that you want to get from Michael, make sure to file that away in the chat right now. But Ira, if you're ready,
real quick,
add one thing. Go for it.
Yeah, on that note, what you were just saying, because there's been some discussion the last week or two, and I know we talked about a little bit on headlines. I know Aslan and Corey talked about on Wake Up as well, and I'm sure you guys have on JCS. Anytime you mention that, like, listen, the goal is probably going to be to win 8 games. If you're 7 to 9, somewhere in that ballpark. And then there will be people that respond to that and say, well, that's ridiculous. That's not Florida State. We should never settle for that. I don't know if it was possible to go from a 2-10 roster. And I don't think it was 2-10 roster, but it was probably a sub 500 roster that fell apart. And you went 2-10. I'm not sure there's a path other than spending double maybe what other people are spending. Are you going to take a team that had that production and flip it completely to play for a new coaching staff that the head coach might be on the hot seat in a year or so, to get it to where it needs to be a team that you're saying that we're all sitting here saying, oh, they're an ACC championship, not just contender, but front runner. I mean, I don't think there's a path to that. I think, to your point, the best case that they were shooting for was get as good as you can get. And that's probably in that 8 to 9 window. If it's 7, if you're disappointed, I think if it's 8 to 9, I think you're feeling okay. At least you've got your solid footing to then make another jump going forward. So I just want to kind of tie that up, because I know when people, especially they don't listen to a lot of the things we talk about, you just hear that and you're like, well, we're hoping to win 7 or 8 games. This is Florida State. I just don't think much more than that was realistic after 2-10.
Yeah, look, it's not ideal. It's the conversation we have to have. It's not the conversation we want to have, speaking as a fan in that regard. And I know this is a little crude, but the Smash has been crude from time to time. I call it the suck tax. When you're terrible, you have to pay extra to get out of jail, especially if you don't bring in a whole new coaching staff from the top down. You have to pay through the nose in order to finish with a top 20 class, in the 2025 recruiting class, where they did so well in the early signing period of flipping kids from multiple SEC institutions. That wasn't because they suddenly liked what it sounded like on the other side of the phone with Tony White, or they had a good FaceTime with Gus Malzahn. That was real stuff, investment there to get some yeses from players like Chroma and Tylon Lee and others. Same thing in the portal. So we'll see where Florida State goes with that. But, I think this is one of our first questions. Is Garrett PCL at 7:05 p.m.? There are more. We'll wipe a few of them across. But Garrett says, why can't we recruit a defensive lineman in Thomasville? All right, I'm going to get out of the way for Ira to have we're going to call it the Don Ira shot of the night. You don't usually hear this from Ira, but go ahead, Ira. What you got?
Tom, I don't talk about recruiting a lot. I mean, how often do we talk about recruiting on the show? There aren't many high schools I know a whole lot about when it comes to college recruiting. I leave that to Michael. I leave that to Matt. I leave that to On3, all their experts. I started my career in Thomasville, Georgia, Tom. You know that. I covered Thomas County Central, several of their state championships back in the early to mid-1990s. I covered Debrell Smiley, and they had a couple of players here that played at Florida State who were Thomas County Central alums. That is a program that I know better than any other high school program, better than the high school I went to in Miami. I'm not telling you that you always have to get players out of Thomas County Central. I am telling you that they're on another great run again. And the way high school football works in South Georgia is because all those schools, most of them are county schools, the players kind of migrate. And so there's a lot of farmland between this school and that school zone and that. And so it's not even recruiting, but the kids want to play at the best program. So when Colquitt County, Moultrie is rolling, a lot of those players will roll up to Moultrie. When Central's got it rolling, which they do, a lot of those players will gravitate towards Central. They are loaded right now, and they have a defensive end named Cam Brooks, who people are asking about, who's a 4-star recruit, might end up being a 5-star recruit. We'll see how it goes. He has wanted to go to Florida State ever since he was a kid. He grew up Florida State fan, wants to go to Florida State. He's made that clear. Every time he's gone on a visit to Florida State's my number one school. For whatever reason, over the last 6 months, it's like Florida State has not been that prevalent when it comes to his recruitment. And so other schools have been working overtime. And, it's Clemson, it's a bunch of schools that are really recruiting hard. Cal is one of them. Cal Berkeley, one of the two schools Florida State beat. On the other side of the country, they've made it a point to recruit Central more than Florida State has. They've apparently been to see this kid multiple times, this young man multiple times. They got him on an official visit this weekend, and he committed to Cal. Listen, fine school. Congratulations, Cam. We'll see if it sticks. I'm sure Florida State and Clemson and everybody else are trying to fight you to keep you out of it. But, man, if this kid, this young man, who's also, like, smart, upstanding citizen, like everybody loves him, 4-star defensive end, I don't know that he's going to end up being the next great defensive end. I do know that he's a 4-star who wants to come to your school, is 30 minutes up the road, and has been talking about Florida State his whole life. And then for whatever reason now, you have not recruited him as hard as Cal. So if that happens, I've given Florida State, I've given these coaches a lot of benefit of doubt over these last 5-6 years, Tom, whether it was COVID. Well, it's hard, man. They've been dealing with COVID for 2 years without visits. Then it was, they went heavy in the portal. And then when you go heavy in the portal, it's hard to really recruit high school kids. So I understand that. If they lose this kid, man, to me, it's the biggest embarrassment yet. And there's been a ton of them. We can go through all the embarrassments they've had in recruiting, and a lot of them I've tried to excuse away. If they do not get Cam Brooks, it is the biggest embarrassment they've had yet. It would be like, and I said this to somebody the other day, it would have been like Florida State losing Antonio Cromartie and Ernie Sims back from Lincoln High School in North Florida Christian. Not that he's going to be that level of player, we'll see. But in terms of your backyard, and he wants to go to your school, there are some guys that, listen, man, there have been players out of Tallahassee that have gone to other schools because they didn't want to stay in Tallahassee. They never really liked Florida State. They wanted to go to Alabama. They wanted to go to Michigan. They wanted to get out of this area. This is one that wants to stay. And if you lose him to Cal, there's no defending that, and there never will be any defending that. And that set me off. I could not believe when I saw that commitment yesterday. And then when you hear that it's partly because they have not really recruited him. I mean, they've recruited him. They've made an effort. I think Tony White, the defense coordinator, went up and saw him in the spring. They've done some things here and there, but they have not really shown him he's a priority the way freaking Cal has from the other side of the country. So, yeah, man, I don't talk about recruiting a lot. That's one school I know. That's one player I've been aware of for 2 or 3 years now, and it looks like they've totally screwed it up.
Well, and you don't bring the heat like that a whole lot.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's outrageous.
Okay, so
I didn't tweet about it yesterday because I don't ever tweet about recruiting. So it would be like, what? And I don't do it on this show either. But the more I think about it, the more pissed off I get. They have to fix it. I mean, and it's not because Cam Brooks is going to be a superstar. We have no idea. It's recruiting. Who knows how any of these guys pan out. But, man, you talk about an embarrassment.
So it sends a signal. Okay. Yes, the Don has spoken. Garrett PCL, he says, I love it. Yeah. Ira, can you excuse any of this because Florida State is coming off of 2-10? Or is this about the basics when it comes to efforting and recruiting? From
what I hear, the only concern, I think Cam was fine with 2, and he wasn't fine with 2-10, but he could get over 2-10, I think, especially if they have a success this season. And again, I'm not pretending that I'm like connected to the family. I just talk to a lot of people who are close to that program and know that program because I've been around that program a long time. He could get past that. I think he did have somewhat of a concern, and it's logical, is you change defensive systems. And so, you went from a 4-3 to primarily a 3-3, and there's a lot of talk about what's the jack position. When he was recruited, when he talked to Tony White, it sounds like they talked to him about playing that jack position. Tom, we cover this team, and I can't tell you exactly what that jack position is. So, we'll see better in the fall. It sounds like it's very interchangeable. So that's a little bit of a concern, is the fit. Like, I think he knew he fit as a 4-3 end. I think there's probably a little bit of concern there. But, man, nothing like that's a problem. That's a deal breaker. This is more about Cal has apparently come and made him a priority. They've made multiple visits going back to the fall and now to see him. And for whatever reason, Florida State. And listen, man, he's not the only one. There's a few other kids at that school there's a receiver named Dunbar who just put out a top 6. He's like a 6'5" receiver that everybody in the country wants. Florida State was one of the last ones to offer him. He put out a top 6 schools, and Florida State was not on that list. I mean, so again, I'm not telling you that you have to get every kid from this region, but you can't get the ones you do want, which I think they do want them, to let them just not even. I mean, it's ridiculous. Again, I think the reason I'm so frustrated is because I did defend them. I found all the reasons to defend what they've done in recruiting. And man, to me, this would be unacceptable.
So is it fair to say you're off Florida State in terms of recruiting prowess until they prove to you that there's a reason to be back on?
There's mounting evidence that, that maybe both things could be true. It was a difficult situation, and they're not good at recruiting. I mean, it's clear they're not good at recruiting. I mean, that's not a shocking development. And they've made some changes. They've made some changes in the recruiting staff. We only talk about the 6 assistant coaches that are different now. There are several staff members in the recruiting department that are different as well. But man, I don't think it matters until it's from the top down, from Mike Norvell. And listen, all the people that criticize, and there's a lot of people in this space that have been very critical of Mike Norvell and this staff for recruiting because they don't feel like they've made it a huge priority because they relied too heavily on the portal. And I've defended what they did because I agree, man, go to the portal, win in the portal. I don't have a problem with that. But in the ones that are layups that we know about are close to layups, you're blowing those. So yeah, I'm convinced now that they're just not good in recruiting. They don't make it a priority, and they're not going to make it a priority. Maybe they'll change my mind back. Maybe they'll win Cam Brooks. Maybe they'll have another couple other players that impress us. But as of right now, man, I think everything people have been saying is true. They do not prioritize high school recruiting, and sometimes they're going to pay for it.
Yeah, this is a very interesting moment for me on the Smash because I feel like I've just done a segment of the JCS in which I'm listening to Jeff talk about Florida State recruiting. Now, we had our a segment or two last week where we both were on Florida State, but it was more about portal approach because there doesn't ever seem to be a handoff in the development side of things to young players. Like it's happening very infrequently against the blue chip rate that you're bringing in recruits, which isn't even like elite, but there's enough 4-stars that you're thinking, all right, at some point, one of these kids that they brought in from the high school ranks, 2 or 3 cycles ago is going to be ready to take the reins. Do you always have to dip into the portal? So there's a couple of flags there that are concerning. But if they do win on the football field this year enough, then perhaps this momentum can change with a new staff. It's just that Ira is right. There are red flags about if you're missing your layups, then what's to say about going down to Miami and going to compete with the Hurricanes or the Gators or Alabama coming down or Georgia coming down to South Florida or South Georgia? Like, what's to say that you can win those battles if you can't win one in your backyard with a kid who really wants to go to Florida State? Is that fair?
Well, and to your point, I mean, and Corey wrote the column over the weekend. People can still find it over at warchant.com, looking at FSU's draft failures over the last decade. This is not all a Mike Norvell problem. It goes back to Willie in the last couple of years under Jimbo. Florida State, those two positions in particular, offensive line and wide receiver, have been a disaster. They just don't put players in the NFL. And that is something that hurts you tangibly every time you recruit. Because even, again, I brought him up before, but Dexter Carter's son, Devin, who now is considering FSU again, we'll see how it plays out. But, early on, he kind of eliminated Florida State because of how bad they don't produce NFL receivers. Then when Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, and you saw some of the progress there, and not that they developed Keon Coleman, but they got him excited. He committed to Florida State, then he decommitted, and we'll see where it goes from here. But if that's Dexter Carter, who's one of your all-time greats, is worried about putting his son at your school because of what you've done with receivers, how is any other prospect or their family going to feel about it? So yeah, those are challenges that are not going away no matter what I say, what you say, no matter how we try to spin it. Other schools are going to use that against Florida State. Look, they don't put offensive linemen in the NFL. They don't put receivers in the NFL. Why do you want to go there? Do they put DBs in the NFL? Yes. Do they put defensive linemen? Sure. Do they put, they've had other positions. Jordan got drafted, quarterback. Other positions have gotten drafted, but those two have not in like a decade, and that's going to be used against you. But when you have players in positions where you don't have that handicap, like defensive end, or in your area, and you can't close them, or you let some other school take them away, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And again, it takes away any benefit of the doubt. We can talk about, again, man, going back to Travis Hunter, the DB that went to Georgia on signing day, like all those things, they're embarrassing, but there's like circumstances around them. But when you can't tap in the layups, I mean, there's no way to defend them. And again, this is a new staff, and maybe they're putting things into place to be better, but the signs right now are not very good.
Yeah, it shouldn't be this bad, especially because you do get some new staff energy. It's like that's not worth nothing. Right. So we'll see if Florida State can compete with Cal to earn a flip, and maybe they can. Maybe they can. They could compete with Cal on the football field. I think Kayvon said in the chat, this is our thank you gift. Is we're not going to recruit Cam Brooks, let him go to Cal for that one ACC win last year, so they didn't get a bagel. A couple of questions before we welcome on Michael Langston, senior portal analyst. Eric asks in the chat, Tom and Ira, in both your minds, what would be acceptable in 2025 for Mike Norvell in terms of a win-loss record? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, I think the goal is to win at least 8 games. If you can win 8 or 9, I think you feel pretty good about it because, again, it just solidifies the base, gives you something to build upon going into that next year. If you win 7, it's probably not good enough, but I don't know whether or not it's fireable. It kind of depends on Corey made this point a lot last week on headlines. He always brings up the Hail Mary loss. But even if it's not a Hail Mary loss, what if, there's a good chance because of the way the schedule sets up, they might be 5-2, 6-2, somewhere in that early on. They've got the schedule's a little bit backloaded with some tough games. That road game at NC State on a Friday night is going to be hard. The Florida game is going to be hard. So if you're looking at one of those games being the difference between 7 wins and 8 wins, and it's a great game, but you just come up short, or both of those games go that way, are you paying the $50-something million? I don't know. So to me, 7's not acceptable, but I don't know that it's fireable. Anything less than 7, man, I think they have to do something because I just don't think if it's 6 or less after all they've invested this offseason with 2 gimmies, I just think that's going to be a deal breaker. Totally
agree across the board. I think the acceptable plateau or the threshold starts at 8. If it's 7, it's not acceptable. We're not in the administration. We're not on the board. So, but I think 8, you start to go, all right. That's at 9, you go, okay, because that means by definition you had to win a game against one of those 4 marquee opponents in Clemson, Miami, Alabama, and Florida. If you get to 9, that is a successful season, more than just acceptable, right?
Yeah, and if you're at 7, you probably lost to the 4 biggest games you have and to somebody else. And so that's, those schools, it's just that would be tough.
Yeah, I don't know that you'll be able to flip Cam Brooks if you lose 5 games this year. Hey, do you feel better about after that, or do you feel more mad after this?
I feel better just because I do want to get it out, and because again I feel like I've tried to give them a benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to repeat myself 10 times here, but I have tried to give them a benefit of the doubt, and I think their reasons make sense. But you lose. It's like when you vouch for a friend, like you've got a buddy that you go out with when you were in college. You had a buddy, everybody had that guy that you hung out with in college that made an ass of himself. Not every time, but once in a while. And when he did, you'd be like, look, he's really a good guy. I know you don't like him. I know he runs his mouth too much, but he's not always that bad. And then, you'll have a couple times with him and everybody's fine. He's not that bad. And then he shows his ass again. And it's like, so you're just like, after a while, you're tired of defending him and then at some point, maybe he does something so outrageous. You're like, dude, I cannot defend you anymore. We can't hang out because you embarrass me. Well, that's kind of where they're at right now.
Last question of the night. Brett, other than tight end, what position group is the strength of the team?
I think that's a good question. I don't know that there's a position that's like loaded. But I also don't know there's any positions that I'm like panicked about. I think they've just upgraded a lot of them. I think the secondary's got a lot of ability. But the fact that they just picked up a corner and they're trying to pick up safety tells you they didn't feel great about it. Now with those 2 guys, when we see them with the pieces that they already have in place, I think that could end up being a strength of the team. We don't know. Defensive line, we haven't seen enough of, I don't think that's going to be a strength, but I don't think it's a weakness. I think there's a lot of that on this football team. Offensive line, I think it's going to be much improved from what it was a year ago, but I don't know that it's going to be great. Wide receivers can be much, much improved from what it was a year ago. And I think there's a potential for that to be a really, really, really good room. But I don't know if it's going to be a great room. And quarterback is the same. I think we all feel like Tommy's a huge upgrade. Building an offense around him, you're going to have a lot of success. But I don't know that you feel like, Tommy Castellanos is the savior. So, I mean, that's where I'm at. I don't know about you, Tom.
Yeah, I agree. I think receivers got a shot. I think corner now has a shot too, because I think that they like a couple of players there. But getting the Houston transfer, Jeremiah Wilson, kind of rounds it out.
Yeah.
I'll sneak one more in. Philip Moore, does NIL outweigh results? For example, if Tommy's getting outplayed in practice by one of our other quarterbacks, do you think that because we are paying him so much that he gets first dibs regardless?
Nope, he's out the door. Yeah, no, no, I understand why people think that. And I think people thought that about DJ when DJ was playing after the first 4 or 5 games, and people were frustrated that he was not very good until he got injured. I think you saw he was the best quarterback they had. Yeah. Now you could say, oh, well, Luke made a couple of plays or Brock made a couple of plays. DJ with a better offensive line and receivers who could catch the ball, I think would have been fine. But once those things weren't in place and they couldn't run the ball and he's a statue and the fans are booing him, chanting, "We want Brock," I just think it all fell apart. But he was the best quarterback. I mean, Tom, we were out there at practices. I never once felt like you need to be playing one of these other guys. Did you?
No, this reminds me of the Hakeem Williams discussion I had with my friends. They're like, "Hey, how's Hakeem doing?" I said, "Well," and this is his freshman year. Like, well, Vandravius Jacobs is playing well. Vandravius is good. Hakeem's raw, man. He's not ready. And they're like, really? I'm like, I'm telling you, he's been the better player. Same thing with this. Like, how's Brock doing? I'm like, it's not a competition. Like, it's not. It really is.
When the students started chanting, "We want Brock" in the second game of the year, I was like, oh, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you want. I mean, no offense, Brock, but he wasn't ready. And DJ was better. And so this would be a situation, same thing. If Castellanos is playing, it's because he gives them the best chance to win. Does that mean he's going to be perfect? No, but if you pull him, it doesn't mean Kevin Sperry is either, or Brock Glenn, or the young kid.
Yeah, it was like Jameis Winston famously said last year, "Lord, deliver me from these pick sixes." Like when Brock came in last year, I said, "Lord, please tell me he's a gamer." Because he ain't a practicer on the level of DJU. Ira, I appreciate the time. Thanks for the fire. I think we're going to use that as a video. Wagging the finger at recruiting, or maybe we can have a staff intervention about what's going on with recruiting.
Hopefully, maybe Michael can smooth it over for me.
Yeah, I think he's about to. He's the lead portal analyst, lead recruiting analyst for Warchant.com. His name is Michael Langston. He'll join us in 15 seconds after we say goodbye to Ira. Goodbye, Ira.
Contact Russ Boris for an auto quote today.
I got stuck. I was trying to put on my Lightning jersey because we're in the playoffs right now. Hang on. Very, very unprofessional. So we're not going to get the jersey on. Oh, well. Here it is, folks. Somebody asked me in the chat if you're going to wear it. He's Michael Langston. He's the lead portal analyst. I'm just going to throw this bad boy over my shoulder. And Michael's been a very busy man here on Warchant TV over the last week. Michael, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. I don't know how I can. I did not see the fire and brimstone from Ira, but the way you guys talked about it, it sounded about like how I felt yesterday on the subject. I won't go a lot into it. I'll just say that's embarrassing overall, and it shouldn't happen. And even if he's a guy that isn't as high on your radar, say you like him and you don't love him, I think that's still a guy you have to heavily pursue and make a priority. I think Ira put it perfectly. I'm not going to sit there and jump in, but I think that was just not the best look in the world for their high school recruiting.
Well, sadly, Michael, we've had to do several segments over the years where we're talking about, recruiting lacking, whether it's the live selection day show or just some videos. It's rare for Ira to get mad about recruiting. Yeah. Like, he doesn't ever get I think he would say, I don't know that I care enough to get mad about recruiting. He's furious in this particular instance. Yeah. And I do want to give you the floor on this, Michael, because, it was weeks ago that we did the love-hate video, position you love, position you hate. And I know it's not edge, but you hated where Florida State was sitting at that moment at defensive tackle. So I'll just ask you the broad question. In your estimation, what's going on with the defensive line recruiting right now?
Yeah, I mean, portal-wise, I think overall they have guys that they they prioritize and they're important. But overall, high school wise, we're not seeing, you know, I think it's just when you're starting over and beginning, it's almost like they're starting over again and they're trying to create what they are going to be. Because a lot of these kids, yeah, you could do all that stuff in Nebraska, but a lot of these kids don't know what you did and really, frankly, don't care. They want to see the results. And I think this is more of a position that will be affected, in the during the season, where I think then they could really we could see some good amount of movement. But I think that's where they're at because you had a guy that's a legend here before, certainly did a great job of developing players over his years and the countless guys in the NFL. But a lot of these people don't know. A lot of these recruits don't know who this guy is, so they have to recreate themselves to what they're going to be, as far as the defensive line. And I think that's where they're at with that.
That makes sense. Now, in terms of the portal, Florida State does have quite a few targets lined up. There's an article on the site right now about 5 targets that Florida State's looking at. But in terms of intel, Michael, on visits and what this week is going to look like for Florida State, I think we talked about this earlier. Ira and I did. In portal recruiting, if you're the third stop on the list, you're hoping that the kid makes it 3 stops on the tour. So things are always fluid that way. But as it stands right now, what does the week look like for Florida State in terms of hosting potential prospects?
Yeah, I think Matt Lasser did a really good job of 5, the 5 targets. The only one I would add in there is Joshua Raymond. That's one that offensive lineman that is supposed to visit this week. We haven't got a date yet, but that's certainly one that you'll see a few offensive linemen this week. I think you'll certainly see a certain safety in Jacoby Thomas, who just entered the portal from Tennessee. That's one that I've mentioned several times on the site that I think is probably the highest guy that as far as a want and covet into this class. Sure, you'll see a receiver or maybe a running back also visiting, um, maybe another safety type, but I think overall, Matt laid the groundwork really out well. For those that haven't read it, phenomenal story on the front page. Really addresses those 5 targets, and I think there's more. I think you could see them, hosting around 6 or 7 guys, throughout the week. I think I've said this before, and I said this last night on the site that I think they would like to not wrap up everything, but wrap up a good portion of what they want in the spring portal this week if they can, because May 1st, that's when high school kids start practicing. So they're going to want to visit certain guys. I think we already saw that today. I think FSU went to see CJ Bronow from Nebraska commitment. So I think you'll see a lot more of that. So they want to spend a lot of that time on that. So I think certainly nailing down a good decent portion of these prospects this week, whether it be offensive line, defensive line, and certainly the safety position and receiver. I think FSU wants to nail that.
Now, I know that the roster number is a tricky thing because the House settlement hasn't gone through, and scholarships versus roster limits. Like, we're not in a solid place yet. But Scott's asking about offensive and defensive line. Like, do you think, Michael, because we're talking about a lot of positions here, safety, O-line, D-line, I saw tight end also, wide receiver, like, that's a lot of different positions. Are there a certain amount of slots, do you think? Or is this just about if the kid's interested, they're going to take them and they'll figure it out later? What do you think?
I think if they covet them, a priority, because we've seen kids that visit from the portal that don't end up at FSU, whether they don't push or don't take. I think the local kid last year from NFC was a good example of that. The receiver, they ended up, I think, Ole Miss or somewhere. But I think overall, I think I've illustrated the priorities. The priorities are edge, defensive line, wide receiver. Certainly, you want to add one in there, if not 2, and then of course that safety position. You really want to hammer out that, and then I think offensive tackle. You'd have to put that in there. That they certainly want a offensive tackle. So there's certain ones they would like to add, like a replacement for a tight end, a running back if it fits your situation. And there's other needs that edge. Okay, we got to get in that. You have to get. I got to get that offensive tackle. I got to get that, and then safety. I got to get that. Like, but there's other positions that are almost like, yeah, if this fits us, we pursue it. We'll go. We'll aggressively push for it. But I think the main point is getting the things that you need, not so much getting everything that you're, I guess, making a possibility as far as a position you might go after, like tight end or running back or stuff like that. But I think there's certainly several positions, around 3 or 4, that I think they feel like, hey, we got to get one here.
If you have questions for Michael, leave those in the chat right now on either Warchant TV, YouTube version, Facebook version, or if you're watching on Twitter X, we get all 3 of those questions. From Facebook, Jason asks, how do we get right on the O-line recruiting and development going forward? It's been a downward spiral since 2014. I know, Corey wrote a long article, a good one about, Florida State and the pipeline to the NFL that is not for offensive line and receiver.
Mm-hmm.
How has offensive line recruiting struck you, Michael, over the last, several cycles, and what do you think Florida State needs to do?
Well, I think first off, to answer Jason's question, you have to develop them. That's it. I mean, you have to develop your offensive linemen. You have to get these guys that are, whether it's the portal or it's guys that you recruited out of high school, you got to start developing them. Now, the good news for them, at least in theory, and what we've seen and what he does, Herb Hand is extremely good at this. Like, that's one area he's very strong at. So I think it's just about setting an example, Jason, of what they're doing. Once you set the example and get 1 and then 2 and then it starts rolling over. But first of all, they have to show the production on the field. Ira mentioned and even Tom mentioned, this is a group that should be considerably better than a year ago. So I think at first you start with the production, and then you'll start being able to pull offensive linemen here and now. And then with Herb Hand's experience of coaching at a lot of different places, Texas, a lot of schools. I can't even remember all the schools that he's coached at, but about all these schools, if you start producing and you start showing the production and how people would fit in there, I think that will be fixed. But I think it all starts, the beginnings part has to begin with your development, because it's been atrocious the last few years, really bad in every sense of the word. Whether you have guys that are in the program, they're just not developing under that system or that coach, or just the guys they're targeting, they're not what maybe they thought they were. As far as once they got there, or how they would have going to develop. So I think it's really identifying your guys, but also just showing the guys that you're coaching this year, showing the development. And I'm not talking about the 3 that we know offensive line that are transfer portals. I'm talking about guys that are young, that are in there, that can come in there and contribute early and help you. That's the one that's going to move the needle for recruits and really change this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your development, start doing it. Very simple.
Yeah.
Wes the Villages says, yo, Michael, I'm hearing whispers that we may get another transfer or 2 by the end of the week. Are you feeling that vibe as well? And any guesses? Keep up the great work.
Yeah, I'm not feeling one that's like imminent or anything. That's for sure. I think Tony Johnson visited over the week. I think that's one that I feel like that visit went really well. Although he's kind of quiet with anybody, he doesn't really talk to anybody. But I felt like that makes sense for both parties if you think about it. FSU needs a fairly productive guy to add in there. He would mix in well with the portal guys and the high school guys. I think BJ Gibson's going to be a name that you hear a lot during the season. There's a lot of talented guys that I feel that are on that roster. So mixing him in with having a productive guy like him, I think that would be certainly a big one. That would be the only one I would say that I'm watching for sure. But they have several visitors this week, and it's hard to dictate. It's not like Jeremiah Wilson where I told Tom, hey, get ready. This is probably going to happen,
Yep.
this week. I don't think we have one of those yet, but there's several targets in there that I feel like, hey, if it goes well, it clicks. Yeah, they could have some, not just one, but multiple action, as far as adding to this thing. And that, like I said at the beginning, I think that's kind of what they want to do. They really want to hammer a lot of this class out this week if they can.
Carol from Facebook asks, good evening, Michael and Tom. Good evening.
Hey.
Well, what is the last day to acquire a player from the portal? Are there any that you would like to see come for a visit that are not on the radar yet? I think that just depends on summer and fall enrollment. That's an academic calendar thing, Carol, but they got plenty of time. They got lots of time to grab a player.
Yeah, they got a lot of time. I think most part, Carol, you want to get it done in the month of May, because the month of May is kind of almost like a dead area where recruits aren't going to visit too much, because, like I said, they're playing high school ball, they're doing spring practice, and then two, the coaches have to go on the road, so it makes it easier if you can iron this out in May. So I think it'll probably be done in May. But yeah, they have plenty of time. It just depends on the school and the calendar year and how that works. But overall, this is a big week for FSU.
Yeah, I think in terms of the kids that you want to see on campus that are not on the radar yet, I think that's mostly reserved for high school recruiting at this point. Go back to Jason, and he's asking about Cam Brooks, which is it deserves to be a headline story right now. What's the vibe around Coach Norvell amongst high school recruits? Hearing a 4-star local guy felt more from Cal than FSU is alarming, to say the least, coming off of a horrendous season.
Yeah, we had me, Ira. I won't say the other one, but there's other people. I'd say a Thomas County Central person that was close to it, and it was basically like Cal had been there like 3 or 4 times, so they've been there more than FSU, and FSU's 30 minutes away, and Cal's like 10,000 whatever miles it is away. So that that rubs you wrong. But I would say this with Thomas County Central, people might try to throw it on Thomas County Central. Thomas County Central is almost like a Florida High to FSU. Basically, they run a lot of their stuff and similar things to FSU. They brought their whole team over just to watch FSU practice. They love a lot of those guys. I think are they love FSU or they like them. That's a team they root for. So this is more just not doing the job, not making him a priority like they should have. Not to rehash all this stuff, but it's just something where local talent. I think yeah, that's a tricky thing because sometimes you recruit local talent. It's kind of like you don't want to put too much, but this was another level of that where this was just to me. Tom, to cut it simple, this was a layup if they just recruit the kid hard, and they could still get him back. But like I said, we the Ira thing is not surprising if you would have listened to the texts I had with Ira last night. So
Yeah,
I'll just
yeah.
put it that way. So I think it's embarrassing overall, and I'm not going to try to slam on these guys too much, but they just have to be better.
Yeah, it is kind of an understood that it's not done. Like with Cal,
Right,
this is not
right,
he's shutting it down. Like
right.
Cam Brooks could be enticed to come back and hear from the good guys at Florida State
Right.
if they bother to handle business.
Yeah, they got to do their business. They got to prioritize. I mean, one of the people I talked to last night was like, he hasn't even really have an in-depth conversation with the position coach. So it's like when you're doing stuff like that, it's kind of like, okay, I'm not important to you, so I'm not going to make you important to me. And it's not a shocker you come into Cal because Cal's recruiting several other kids from Thomas County Central. But I think you just have to do a better job. Of a guy like that, you should never lose. That should be a layup. And like I said, they can get it back, showing the product, showing the interest, showing how he fits in there, and showing that he matters to him. That hey, we want you here. Yeah, I know Norvell stopped by early this spring, and I know Tony White was there, but that's just not enough, guys. You need to be at that guy. You need to be at that school like every waking chance that you have, and that's really my final comment on it. But they have work to do. Can they get it done? Yeah, sure, but they got to do better than what I think. This is an example of how you don't want to handle a
Yeah,
local kid.
especially considering you're 2-10, so you got to convince people. Let's see. This is a safety question. This will be our last one of the night, unless somebody else sneaks one in. But Jacob asks if AJ Halsey lands in Miami. That's the Houston safety transfer, who loves Jeremiah Wilson, by the way. That they're clearly they're close. How do you feel about our chances for the safety at Tennessee? And that would be a name we mentioned earlier tonight. That's Jacoby Thomas, who has the connection to Florida State through Rick Stockstill. So, what do you think about safety, Michael?
Man, Jacob, you're trying to steal my article tonight or something. I mean, that's what I was going to write on tonight. Yeah, that's. I think Jacob, that's very realistic. AJ's very close with Jeremiah. So certainly, if it doesn't work out for Jacoby Thomas, I could see that. Or flip side, if say AJ goes to Miami, I think it certainly increases FSU's chances a lot with a guy like Jacoby Thomas. And I think both of those guys, to me, are almost at even level of how much they want them. Both are top tier, coveted. probably two of the best safeties I think are in the portal that I've seen as far as studying film. So I think you'd be happy with either one of them. Certainly, but that's a really good point. I'll certainly illustrate and cover that, either later tonight or it'll go up tomorrow, on what I'm hearing from the portal and, kind of where it's at going into these visits that Matt kind of illustrated earlier today.
Let me unmute myself. Michael, last thing, did you exhale like I did when the portal window was closed and no large names from Florida State? And I mean that maybe, literally no large names entered their name into the portal.
You mean like Daryl Jackson or somebody like that?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, exhale when you hear that, because it's kind of like, okay. It's almost like, okay, it's like your favorite team's playing and you somehow your pitcher's in there with the bases loaded and you're just like, okay, you finally gets it out and it's over.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sigh of relief. So yeah, it's definitely a sigh of relief. There's still work to do, but it makes it much easier when you know what's in the portal. So yeah, definitely. I think anybody that covers or has a genuine care about FSU is certainly breathing a sigh of relief when now that part is over.
Now we know who will be on Florida State's roster in terms of the kids that were there in spring camp. We know who's gone, who will stay, and the next thing that's up is who are they going to add in the transfer portal. That's where Michael Langston has you covered. He has a content item coming up tonight/tomorrow about Florida State and the safety position, more rumblings from the portal. All the rumblings and visit schedules and little details are available on the premium recruiting board. Join the largest FSU fan community in the business. It's $1 for your first week to join us here at warchant.com. You will not be disappointed, and it is a really, really busy time right now. As Michael said, Florida State is looking to close this whole thing out in terms of what their ads are going to be before they hit the road to recruit high school kids, which I'm sure they're going to do, and hopefully they're going to do it with gusto. Head over to warchant.com if you haven't signed up yet, or if you are a member, pop on over right now to get all of those latest updates. Michael, anything you want to promote outside of that, or let people know before we sign off, or are we calling it an evening?
We'll have a lot more stuff as the week goes on. Definitely go to the PRB guys consistently, because that stuff is updated by either me or Matt on the portal and updates, and it's pinned at the top. You can't miss it. It says portal time. It's right there, so everyone can see it. And then we'll certainly have features as the week goes on. And then I'm in the future and coming up weeks. I'm going to travel around a few places, a few high schools, check in some targets and kind of give the latest of kind of what's going on there. And then we get ready for those junior official visits. It's going to be a big summer and a busy one, and get ready for camp season.
There it is. Camp season's coming soon. It's going to be very, very busy over the next couple of months. Off season is not really an off season anymore in college football. All right, everybody, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate those that contributed in terms of questions. I also want to thank Hayden for his actual monetary contribution, but everybody who's Warchant Premier member, thank you all for being here tonight. And again, if you're listening on the podcast, our sponsor is State Farm agent Russ Vorhis. His website is his name, russvorhis.com, russvorhis.com. For Ira Schofel, for Michael Langston, for director Ben Spicer behind the scenes, my name is Tom Lang. Go Bolts. Let's see if they can get a win tonight. And Michael, we appreciate all the hard work as always. Thanks, man.
You got it.
Good night, everybody.